Welcome to another edition of the Quarantine Q&A here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. I'm Sean Myers alongside Dan Flickinger. We're talking to Westmoreland County athletic directors at the high school level. And today we're joined by Dan Mahoney, Greensburg Central Catholic's athletic director, year number 9 for Dan. And thank you for taking the time to do this. I know not ideal circumstances, but we're always glad to talk to our good friends in the athletic departments around Westmoreland County.
Well, thanks. Glad to be with you guys.
We mentioned year number 9 for you, Dan, and I know you've accomplished a lot during your tenure at Greensburg Central Catholic. We always like to get the background on our guests, so take us through your resume leading up to your current position as AD.
Well, I had previously coached. I was an assistant principal and principal in our elementary schools in the Diocese of Greensburg, and then since graduating from college, I've coached varsity football. I finished about 5 years ago. I had coached football for 32 years as an assistant and head coach at some various schools around our area. And the majority of the years were at Greensburg Central.
And what really appealed about Greensburg Central Catholic to you? Why was that the right destination for you as athletic director?
Well, it kind of just blended in from my positions in the elementary schools and then working as a coach there. And then the biggest thing is just the home, close atmosphere there that really attracted me and kept me there and kept me from really looking for any other additional positions or other schools. It's just that family feeling there that I've loved for all the years I've been there.
And Dan, you have more responsibilities than just the athletic director at GCC, right?
Yeah, there's a number of different areas throughout the building that I take care of, other than some class work as well as phys ed and health teacher. But yeah, you kind of put on all the different hats when you're working there.
Dan, you mentioned that you had background as a football coach, and I remember covering your teams. Always a successful program for the Centurions. But about 5 years ago, the numbers, I think, took a little bit of a hit. Greensburg Central Catholic dropped down, had some, I would say, average seasons, maybe a little bit below expectations. But this past year was a resurgent one under the guidance of Brett Colbert. Aaron Smetanka did a great job getting the program headed right in the right direction, and Brett Colbert seemed to take it to a next level. How did you evaluate his first season, ultimately guiding the Centurions back to the playoffs?
I think he did an outstanding job. He brought some good assistants with him. His father returned to help out as well as one of the assistants, and he has a wealth of knowledge and experience that, helped that program, helped the offensive side of the ball. Brett did a great job, and he continues to. He's been really reaching out. His main focus right now is really reaching out to our former players and alumni, bringing them back in, having them interested in the program again, and whatever capacity they can help. So he's done a very good job, and we're really looking forward to this upcoming fall.
Dan, when Aaron left to take the head coaching job at St. Vincent, I'm sure you were happy for him. I'm sure it was upsetting to not have him at GCC anymore, but to see the success. They won a couple of games last year, which was nice. Was it a fairly easy decision though to hire Coach Colbert as his successor?
Yes, he did a great job with Aaron. The kids really liked him. So that was, I think that's the bottom line and the basis to begin with when you're looking for a successor to Aaron. And you get that good vibe and feel from our players. So I thought that was a comfortable fit, and, it just blended right into him taking over.
And we'll get a little bit more into the football realignment in a few minutes, but wanted to focus on the fact that GCC does have some challenges in terms of its roster size. It competes in Class 1A, and a lot of times as the years progress, we see fewer and fewer players coming out for football. What have those challenges been like, and what is GCC doing to combat that?
Well, you're right. I mean, the numbers have been a big thing. Even prior to me finishing up, we were in the high 20s, which, it's just tough to run the program that way. And overall interest level, I think even around the county and even the country, the numbers are down in participation in football. What we've been fortunate, though, is we have a guy named Rob DeLucas, who's an alum and graduate. and played at Central. And he's done an outstanding job with our 7th and 8th program called the Westmoreland Saints. A lot of those kids the last 3 years have just blended right in as they come into Greensburg Central as a freshman. So that's brought the numbers back up. We're in the mid-30s, the high 30s now. So it's helped a lot, and a lot of good quality kids in his program are helping us succeed again.
We mentioned the realignment, and we know that there was a couple of different proposals on the table. One was somewhat status quo, and that's what they ultimately went with, keeping it by classifications. There was also a geographic debate. I want to get your thoughts on the different proposals, if you lean one way or another, and what was ultimately decided upon.
We went with the status quo, and mainly because it really didn't affect us, because we were, remaining in single A versus the geographic part. So we just felt that, because we're single A, we're going to stay there. Many of the teams that we're playing we've been in this conference together for quite a while. So it works, it worked out for us.
Dan, I might as well ask you now about the question, and I know this has been seemingly a century-old topic about separating public and private schools in different sports. And Aaron Bernstein, the one state representative near Harrisburg, sent out some legislation last year. He presented some legislation last year to separate the state tournaments for public and private schools. So the regular season and the WPIAL playoffs, everything would still be the same. But once you got into the PIAA playoffs, things would change where you'd play other private schools and you would not play any public schools until the end. If you made it to the end, then you'd play in a big Super Bowl or something, he was calling it, which I thought was a little bit silly. But they would also eliminate all transfer rules. So what were your thoughts on that when that was first presented last year? It doesn't seem like it's had much traction since then.
Exactly, and just what you said, it never really got any legs or anything of that nature. So it wasn't really anything that we were concerned or focused on. We were basically worried, not just concerned about the quality of our program and what we need to do at Greensburg Central, and wherever that may end up, we'd fall into that at a later date. But I don't see anything gaining from that right now.
It seems like that would certainly put the private schools, the small private schools, at a disadvantage, wouldn't you think?
Yes, I think so. It would.
Talking to Dan Mahoney, the athletic director in year number 9 at Greensburg Central Catholic, here on the Quarantine Q&A on the Westmoreland Sports Network. If you think back to this past football season, one of the notable names on the team was Nate Ward. He was a terrific kicker. Obviously, he contributed in many ways, but he was an interesting story because as good as he was at football, that was his second best fall sport. He was terrific on the boys' soccer team, and that team went to win a WPIAL championship. Soccer has always been a staple of Greensburg Central Catholic, whether it be the girls or the boys. Let's talk a little bit about this boys' season. What stands out from that squad that ultimately claimed gold?
Well, not only the quality of a player that Nate Ward was, but just the overall chemistry of that team. They had a goal from the beginning back in August. They worked together. And it showed their closeness as a team, and our head coach just did an outstanding job with them and kept them all focused and glued together, and it paid off for them with the WPL championship.
And I highlighted the success that the girls team has had over the years as well. It seems like almost every single year it's either Greensburg Central Catholic or Shadyside Academy winning the WPL championship. How has that program maintain such success when so many great players have come through and moved on? It doesn't seem like the team ever missed a beat.
I think because of the success they've had, we've had a lot of kids that have decided to come to Greensburg Central and participate and play for our girls program. Right now we have probably 3 or 4 really good 7th and 8th grade girls that played for our middle school program that are just going to feed right in. And again, like you said, they just haven't missed a beat. It's been great.
And I wanted to kind of follow up on that point. You mentioned some players at the elementary or junior high level, 7th and 8th grade. Is that pretty typical that students come to Greensburg Central Catholic before they make it to high school, or do you see a pretty significant influx of people coming, whether they're athletes or not, once they hit the high school level?
Yeah, actually, because since we've had incorporated our 7th and 8th grade with the high school now through the past 6-7 years, that has helped the varsity program to a great degree, especially in the soccer. And the other one is volleyball. The kids are coming in 7th and 8th grade versus 9th or whatever we're transferring at later class levels.
You highlighted the volleyball team at Greensburg Central Catholic, another fall sport that's been terrific, and we just recently profiled the 2016 version of girls volleyball that went on to win a WPIAL as well as a state title for one of our top teams of the decade here on Westmoreland Sports Network. When you think back to that team and even the 2014 team that accomplished the same feats, a WPIAL and a state title, what really stands out in your mind?
Just the overall excellence of those players. We had some really good individual girls that, had an outstanding career for us at Greensburg Central, and it just elevated the play of many of the other girls, and it really inspired the overall program. And we've been doing well year in, year out because of that.
As Sean said, another fantastic fall sports season for GCC last year. And Dan, I want to ask you about the girls golf team, which was recently recognized by the YWCA as the sports team of the year. They repeated as PIAA champions last year. Why has the girls golf team at GCC has had not only team accolades, but certainly some fantastic individual accolades as well? What has been the key to their success?
Well, it pretty much started about 5-6 years ago. Obviously, the Zambruno family has been a key cog to this whole thing. Mrs. Zambruno approached me probably 6 years ago and said, we didn't even really have a golf team. We did not have a girls golf team. We had a couple individual situations. So we got that going. And then, because of the sisters' success, other girls have come on board, helped out. Angelique DeWicki won the counties, for us this past year. It's grown, just like we were talking about the volleyball. More girls are interested because of it. We've become stronger, and now they expect the same thing year in and year out.
I think that's really interesting because of these Zambruno sisters, that they could help build a program themselves and really trigger some interest throughout the school. I think that's really cool, and hopefully that program continues. It looks like it's very strong right now for sure.
Right. And again, some younger girls are really interested and can't wait to join that team as well.
And I believe Olivia played on the boys team her first 2 years.
She did, yes. And then that's what spurred everything as far as getting other girls involved, and now our sisters have come through, so it's been great.
We're talking about the fall sports, and while it's certainly unfortunate that the spring sports season has been canceled here in Pennsylvania, I think now a lot of the focus turns on the debate, will fall sports resume as we know it, or will there be significant changes? And I know nothing's been decided at this juncture, but how are you approaching that debate?
Well, I'm talking to our coaches and so forth, and how you have summer camps and programs in place for June and July, whether it be basketball camps or youth football, whatever the case may be. We know we can't run those through June, but we intend on proceeding as planned. Like we're going to have physicals in August, and the heat week acclimation period is going to take place. So until we know otherwise, we'll continue to proceed as we always have.
And people from the outside who don't pay real close attention think, okay, well, the fall sports, that basically starts, last week of August, maybe first week of September. How much work is done in preparation in those summer months of June and July before we even get to football training camp that really is well recognized beginning in August?
As far as the team, you mean, and individuals, or just overall?
Just what overall leads to players having success?
Yeah, I mean, just their weekly routine of workouts, conditioning, all those things. And then really from my end, we plan on the officials' assignments, the transportation, senior night, homecoming, all those things earlier than getting it to, we do that through the summer. So, as I said, then we'll still plan all those things as normal until we would hear otherwise.
Dan, when you're standing on the sidelines or doing what you do as an athletic director on a Friday night, what's going through your mind after coaching for so long? Do you still get those itches on Friday nights?
The first year, yeah. I enjoyed that for so long, but now I'm very happy in the position I'm in, not worried about that anymore. Brett can take care of that stuff.
Well, I'm interested to hear your perspective, Dan, because again, you coached for a long time. What's one of the things or a couple of the things that you think has really changed from the time that you started coaching until now? What are some of the things, not necessarily on the field, but maybe some things off the field as well?
It's tough because, with the kids that we had the time I was there, kids change. The program changes. There was different expectations that we may have had then that aren't necessarily there now. And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just different. I think a lot of commitment to to the program and overall at times. You look at some of those things, but I think I was at the point where it was time for me or a younger group of people to come through as both assistants on the staff and a head coach. And that's where Aaron stepped in and did such a great job. It was a breath of fresh air, and remove anything that was maybe stagnant there that we needed to restart. Mm-hmm. So
when you talk about the expectations, each and every year, boys basketball has high expectations, and that did not change this past year with the introduction of a new coach in Christian Highland, one of the youngest coaches, I'm to understand, in the entire state of Pennsylvania for boys basketball. It wasn't very long ago that he was a player leading GCC on the court. Now he's on the sideline, but he had a lot of success in his first year. When you hired him as the head coach, what were his best qualities that stood out even then?
Just number one, that he's a great individual. Great guy. And number two, as you said, he's one of the youngest, if not the youngest coaches in Pennsylvania. His maturity level is well beyond his age level. He's outstanding in that area. He relates to the kids great. He relates to parents very well. So all those qualities just made it a very smooth transition from Dr. Bizignani into Christian.
Have you ever seen two buzzer beaters in one night before it happened last winter?
That was outstanding. That was great. That was great.
Again, I know you've seen a lot of games. Yeah. Man, that was a special night, wasn't it, for the girls and boys?
That was awesome. That was great for both teams.
Coach Bizignani, of course, a legendary coach for what he did there, and he was a pretty legendary color commentator, I would say, working with us. But I know he's still very involved with helping Christian, and he's sort of a mentor to Christian. But I think if you go back a couple of years, it seemed as though that was the plan in place for Bizignani to step aside, for Christian to take over. So as an athletic director, how do you kind of handle that transition while Bizignani was still the head coach at the time?
Well, the fortunate thing working with Dr. Bizignani, that whole transition, it was a constant communication between all three of us. So, he knew as well as Christian, and they worked, and even Dr. Bizignani's last year as the head coach prior to Christian, that whole transition, he was working with him just to have, as he moved in for his first year. So we communicated all through that well, and I think that's what made it very smooth.
Talking to Dan Mahoney in his ninth year as the athletic director at Greensburg Central Catholic. Bailey Coons was a pretty notable addition to the girls basketball team this past season. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to suit up for very many games. There was a rule in which she had to sit out for a handful of weeks, and then ultimately she was ineligible as the playoffs rolled around. However, the good news is She was only a sophomore, so she'll be available for 2 more years. That was a very public transfer. How do you play a role in that? What do you do to make sure that everything is in line and you're meeting, the requirements that have been set forth?
Just being very upfront. We've had great communication with Bailey's family, her parents, myself, our head coach. We're very glad to have her. She's been a great addition for us, not just in the basketball area. She's just a great girl all around, great student athlete. She's fit into the school very well, and I just really look forward to things to come for her at Central.
Dan, staying in winter sports, the Greensburg Central Catholic couple of wrestlers that wrestle for Mount Pleasant had some nice seasons. Talk about the co-op that you guys have with Mount Pleasant, which has allowed student athletes at Greensburg Central Catholic to continue their wrestling careers.
Yes, it was vital. We've had kids that decided they probably needed to go to their public school because we did not have a wrestling team. So we looked for about 2-3 years just trying to find some type of niche. Fortunately, Mount Pleasant was great with us. That's worked out very well. Patrick and Luke both had really good seasons with them this past year, the last 2 years. And, Luke's an underclassman and look for better things for him even to come. We have one junior high wrestler right now that wrestles for Mount Pleasant as well, and he'll continue with them. Coming up below them, as of now, we don't know. But so far, it's worked out very well. They've been very gracious having our kids, so it's a win-win the whole way around.
How long ago, Dan, was it that you had to kind of not disband the wrestling program, but because of obviously numbers, the GCC kind of got rid of their wrestling program? It wasn't that long ago, right?
Well, actually, it was prior to me taking over. It was during John Sullivan's.
He
was athletic director at the time. And as you said, the numbers dwindled. We lost interest. We couldn't fulfill, necessary weight classes to have a solid program. So that's when it was decided that we would not.
Dan, along those same lines, I know, covering high school hockey pretty closely, that GCC's team returned for a short stint over the past handful of years. It didn't seem like it was sustainable. You go back long before your time as the athletic director, it was a storied tradition of Greensburg Central Catholic hockey. How do you approach something like that, where right now it doesn't seem like you have the numbers to compete at a varsity level, but you have that great tradition and history there at the Centurions?
It's difficult because, as you said, I remember all those years when they were very dominant. And again, it's a number. We're with the total population we have in our school, and you think about the number of sports we're offering, things become very thin, participation-wise. So again, that's another thing. And we were even considering trying to hook up with Greensburg Salem, possibly co-oping with them. Nothing, we didn't proceed to try to finalize that. Maybe that's something we can look at in the future, but as of now, again, the numbers are small. Even with our lacrosse and field hockey and the different fall sports, as far as in spring, it just becomes a number game.
When we talk about spring sports, obviously all the focus has been on the players who don't have that opportunity to compete, and in particular the seniors. When you heard the news, and I think it was somewhat expected from all the athletic directors we talked to, they said we knew this was going to come, that ultimately the season would be canceled. But what was your reaction, and did you reach out to the coaches and players who had their last year and their last season ended prematurely?
Yes, for sure. It's just it's gut-wrenching for them that they can't. They're looking forward to that. For some of them, it's the only sport they may play is a spring sport, whether it be track or baseball, softball, and you just feel for them, and hopefully they'll be able to compete in the college level in their respective sports. And our coaches are very cognizant of reaching out to them, making sure they're okay, and things of that nature. So that communication level's been there.
speaking of communication level, what has the school, and I'm sure you've had many Zoom meetings like everybody else has. What has the meetings wrapped around, and how much planning is there right now for making sure Greensburg Central Catholic is ready to go, hopefully in the fall, whenever the students come back? What type of conversations are you having right now as an athletic department and the school as well?
Just, as we previously mentioned, anything or the item list that you may have that you prepare for year in and year out, you proceed for that, you communicate with our administrators, just to acknowledge that we're on par for what we want to do in scheduling the things that we need to, until we would hear differently. But, everything is normal as year in, year out right now.
Dan, in terms of, we've heard recently that the NBA is going to open up some arenas and workout facilities in certain states to allow players to work out and train for a possible return. In terms of high schools, what would make, let's just say, Greensburg Central Catholic be able to do something like that? Like, what decision would have to be made? Would it be kind of a universal decision with all of the other high schools to say, okay, we're okay now, at least to open up and allow, some kids to come and work out in our weight room or in our track? What kind of decision has to be made to allow that to happen for you?
Well, I think once we got word from our governor that something like that would be permissible, and then obviously through our superintendent and principal, I would be down there lower until I got that word. But I think, once you hear things from them, then, we would obviously investigate the whole opportunity of doing that.
We talked about the spring sports, how they were ultimately canceled, and the disappointment. I'm sure that there was a little bit of disappointment from the new baseball coach, Tom Appleby. He was excited to take over that program that has been so good year in and year out. A WPAL championship, it seems like contending for section and district titles each year. So two-part question. What allows that program to have success under multiple head coaches over the past half decade, and what does Mr. Appleby bring to the table?
Well, again, just that tradition and the expectation level for our baseball program has been, as you said, so good recently that our kids, prepare year in, year out to hopefully get a WPL championship or get to that deep playoff race and possibly a PIA playoff situation. Tom Appleby, I've known him even prior to the baseball softball situation, and number one, he's a tremendous person, great family, and he's been around baseball and softball his life. So we knew when Coach Reese was moving on to go to South Allegheny, he was a great person and candidate that I really wanted in there. And unfortunately, I know he was so excited and fired up and ready to go, and that everything was shut down. But I look for really good things from him in the future and next spring, and our baseball program to continue to succeed.
And in the past, Dan, you guys have had some great softball programs, some great softball seasons. I know it's been a little bit tough lately, but do you see the team with our pal Mike Gaffney, do you see them kind of trending up and
for sure,
trying to get better every season?
For sure. In fact, I just spoke to him this morning just in regards to, he had a couple questions and just completing the rest of our spring season as far as uniforms and things. But as we talked about, we remain in single A. Our numbers are back up. Again, that was a problem like we were mentioning before with some of the other sports. Our numbers were down. We were hoping just to fill teams for 2 years there to have enough girls on the field. We are back up. We look for really good things to come. We have a couple good girls that that came through from 7th and 8th grade that are going to be freshmen next year that are very quality pitchers that play in different travel leagues and so forth. So we're really excited about next spring.
And those pitchers, man, I know they're important in baseball, but softball, if you have a really good pitcher, you can win a lot of games, right?
Sure, for sure. And if you have two, you're in great shape.
You're in real good shape, yeah.
We've talked a lot about the coaches and the athletes who are affected by the cancellation of the spring sports here in Pennsylvania. I want to get how it affects athletic directors as well. I'm sure you've had a little bit more free time, even though you're still busy during this stay-at-home time. What have you been doing?
Just working ahead, really. It's very strange because you're usually going 100 miles an hour every day, whether it be canceling games and rescheduling games, and all the things that come with the spring sports season. The evenings that you spend there, and all the just games and practices and so forth. So that's been really different for me. It's like putting on the brakes and hitting the wall right away. You're kind of in limbo. So my focus has just been working ahead and looking through the summer and what's coming ahead for 2020-21 seasons. Does
your family like the goatee? I see you're sporting.
You know what? It's just I guess it's just something to do while we're in.
Hey, none of us can get haircuts either, unless we want to do it ourselves.
Unfortunately, my son does a good job with that.
Well, that's a good.
Once we get back to school, this will be gone.
Hey, it looks good, man. I say we keep it. What are you doing? Anything? I don't know. Since you have some off time, anything interesting? Catching up on anything?
No, exercising a lot more.
That's a good.
We got a good exercise bike, and I hit that daily hard. So that I wouldn't be doing if we were a normal routine.
Sure.
Because I just spend all my hours up at school.
When we've talked to Westmoreland County athletic directors, a lot of them are in the early stages of their career, first year, second year, things of that nature. You're a little bit more of the veteran of the group, if you will. I'm sure you've accomplished a lot, and we talked about some of the championships that your teams have won, some great individual success. What is your favorite moment, or maybe a few moments that stand out during your tenure, now 9 years through, at Greensburg Central Catholic?
I think probably the biggest thing is watching our student athletes grow from their freshman year until they leave and graduate, and the successes that they have throughout that time there. That's my most proud thing, just watching kids succeed and grow. We'll have championships and you have great teams and so forth, but I just think the overall watching a student athlete grow from a young freshman and graduate and then go on and continue to succeed in college is my favorite thing about the position.
Dan, we've conducted many interviews with Greensburg Central Catholic student athletes in our 10 years, and I continually am impressed with how well they speak and just how much of a focus they have on certainly academics. What kind of things are being, taught at Greensburg Central Catholic to allow these student athletes to just get a great, well-rounded experience at GCC?
Well, I think at first it comes from their family, their parents. They send their child to Greensburg Central for that education, and they come from strong academic backgrounds for the most part. So the expectation level by the family and parents and so forth are at that high level. And those kids, they're if they're not on the field for a practice, they're in the cafeteria working on everything they can academically for the next day or for that week. So you see that succeed, that I think, and that definitely translates over to the playing field in all of our sports. And I think that's a big reason why we do have success in so many of our on so many of our teams, is because that work ethic that they have academically transfers over to the athletic arena.
We talk about the athletes that came through GCC, how well-spoken they are. I recently had a Westmoreland alum Q&A with Jack Libator, former baseball standout. He's now at Ohio. And the question I asked him towards the end, I asked a lot of these athletes, if you could face one player, past or present, who would you go against? Now, he's a pitcher. I said, who would you want to face for an at-bat? And he said Tommy Pellis. And the second part of the question is, what would the result be? And he said, of course, it would be a strikeout. So I kind of want to get your thoughts. If that scenario were to happen, and I know that Flick would love to see it happen, what's the result of those two going head-to-head?
It can be 50-50. I'm not. I don't know. I like the thing I like best about it is they're both so competitive. They want to go against two good quality kids. That's the best part.
Yeah, I said we'll broadcast it if it happens. We'll stay 6 feet away, but
yeah, I would want to see it as well.
Dan, one thing that I want to leave you with, I've asked a lot of athletic directors, what are the future goals? If you were to give maybe a long-term outlook, a long-term plan for GCC, what areas do you want to address throughout the rest of your time as the AD?
Number one, growing our numbers in the various sports that some that we're concerned about whether we would have to drop because we're losing that. So definitely an influx of some more athletes on various teams to continue the standard that we have now and year in and year out produce what we've been producing. That's a very proud thing for myself.
Dan, we appreciate the time. Good talking to you as always. Again, I know you've known you for a long time, going back to your days as the football coach at Greensburg Central Catholic, and obviously your role as AD has been a very successful one as well. We appreciate you taking the time, even though we're talking to you and fellow ADs under less than ideal circumstances.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you, Dan.
Dan Mahoney, the athletic director at Greensburg Central Catholic. That'll do it for this edition of the Quarantine Q&A. We'll have more episodes to come. They'll be right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network.